What would you do if you discovered that behind the elegant, seemingly impeccable facade of one of the most renowned houses in your city lurked a true factory of death? A place where innocence was shattered, dreams were extinguished, and lives were stolen in the most horrifying ways imaginable. How would your heart ache? How would your soul recoil in terror and sorrow upon learning that dozens of young women, full of hope and vitality, who had journeyed to your city in desperate search of a better life, found only agonizing torment, betrayal, and a slow, excruciating death at the hands of those who deceitfully promised them protection, prosperity, and a fresh start? The pain of their unheard cries, the tragedy of their silenced stories, the sheer, gut-wrenching injustice of it all would pierce through you like a dagger, leaving an indelible scar on your conscience and a haunting reminder of humanity's darkest capabilities. In the melancholic autumn of 1904, as the golden leaves gently blanketed the cobblestone streets of Krasnodar, and the crisp wind from the Kuban River carried a deceptive sense of serenity through the urban quarters, no one, absolutely no one, could have fathomed the unspeakable atrocities unfolding within the walls of an elegant mansion on Krasnaya Street. These events, shrouded in secrecy and steeped in unimaginable cruelty, would soon erupt into a scandal that shook the very foundations of the Russian Empire, etching itself as one of the most harrowing, blood-chilling chapters in the grim annals of criminology. The weight of the suffering, the layers of deception, the profound betrayal of trust, it all converged in a narrative so dark, so laden with human anguish, that it continues to evoke waves of empathy, outrage, and profound sadness even today. The investigation, which would unravel this web of horror, began innocuously enough with a routine report of a disappearance, a plea born from familial worry and growing despair. On September 19, 1904, a respectable Second Guild merchant named Andrei Petrovich Sokolov, his face etched with lines of anxiety and fear, filed a desperate report at the police station in Ekaterinodar, as Krasnodar was known at the time, about his missing 22-year-old niece, Maria Sokolova. This young woman, brimming with youthful optimism and the innocent dreams of a brighter future, had arrived from Rostov-on just 2 weeks earlier, her heart full of hope as she sought employment in the bustling city. The last agonizing trace of her was a sighting of her entering the building of the Romanov sisters' house, an establishment that held a deceptively prestigious reputation in the community. This house, officially presented as a haven offering lodging for single women seeking work, along with a sewing workshop where residents could earn temporary wages through honest labor, masked a far more sinister reality. Police Constable Nikolai Ivanovich Dubrovin, a seasoned officer whose instincts had been honed by years of dealing with the underbelly of society, was assigned to verify the report. At first, he approached the matter with the formal detachment typical of such cases, his mind perhaps wandering to the mundane explanations that often resolved these disappearances. After all, the house belonging to Elizaveta and Alexandra Romanov, who bore no relation to the imperial family, yet whose name evoked an air of false nobility, enjoyed an impeccable, almost untouchable reputation among the city authorities. The sisters were celebrated for their generous charitable donations that seemed to flow from a well of benevolence, their regular attendance at church services that painted them as pillars of piety, and their close, influential ties with representatives of the city administration. Their facade of respectability was so convincing, so deeply ingrained in the social fabric, that it blinded many to the evil festering beneath. Moreover, the disappearance of young women like Maria, vulnerable souls arriving in the city with wide eyes and empty pockets, chasing the elusive promise of opportunity, was tragically not uncommon in those turbulent times. Many simply vanished into the vastness of the empire, relocating to other cities without a word to their worried relatives, leaving behind trails of unanswered questions and broken hearts. "I remember the first time I saw that house," Dubrovin later recounted in his memoirs, his words laced with a haunting regret that spoke volumes of the emotional toll the case took on him. It was a majestic 3-story mansion in neoclassical style, adorned with grand columns at the entrance and surrounded by a meticulously manicured garden that whispered of refinement and tranquility. Nothing, absolutely nothing, in its outward appearance hinted at the abyss of horror, the symphony of screams and suffering, concealed behind those polished walls. The elegance was a cruel illusion, a mask that hid the raw, visceral pain inflicted within. Elizaveta Romanova, the elder sister, greeted Dubrovin in a spacious living room decorated with exquisite taste, fine tapestries, ornate furniture, and an air of sophistication that could disarm even the most skeptical investigator. She was a woman of about 40, possessing impeccable manners and a cold, calculated beauty that, despite the subtle lines of age, still commanded attention and perhaps a shiver of unease. Her composure was unnerving. She answered his questions with a calm assurance that bordered on arrogance, showing him the guest registration book where it was noted that Maria Sokolova had indeed stayed with them from September 5th to 12th. According to the entry, Maria had checked out voluntarily, claiming she had secured employment at the city governor's house and was relocating there. A story that seemed plausible on the surface but carried the faint whiff of fabrication. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary, a neat resolution to what could have been a tragic mystery, and Dubrovin was on the verge of closing the case, dismissing it as another fleeting disappearance in a world full of uncertainties. But fate, or perhaps a divine spark of intuition, intervened in the form of one peculiarity that caught his trained eye, igniting a flame of suspicion that would burn through the layers of deceit. What intrigued Constable Dubrovin, stirring a deep-seated professional doubt, was a glaring discrepancy in the registration book. Maria Sokolova's name was inscribed in a handwriting markedly different from the other entries, its strokes bolder, less fluid, as if written in haste or by a trembling hand. Moreover, the ink appeared fresher, its hue not yet faded by time, and upon closer, painstaking inspection under the light, he discerned faint traces of an erased entry lurking beneath the new one, like a ghost of truth struggling to emerge from the shadows of lies. This anomaly, small yet significant, aroused Dubrovin's unyielding professional suspicion, compelling him to delve deeper despite the risks. He resolved to verify the information about Sokolova's alleged employment at the governor's house, a step that would expose the fragility of the sisters' carefully constructed alibi. As he anticipated, no one at the governor's residence knew anything about a young woman from Rostov. Her name drew blank stares and shaking heads, confirming his growing fears. The web of deception was unraveling, thread by thread, revealing a pattern of profound tragedy. Further investigations, conducted with meticulous care and a heavy heart, unveiled a chilling reality. Over the past 3 years, more than 20 women who had sought refuge at the Romanov sisters' house had vanished without a trace, their lives snuffed out like candles in the wind. All of these victims were young, attractive, and heartbreakingly isolated. They had no wide circle of acquaintances in the city to raise alarms or demand justice. The majority had arrived from distant towns, their suitcases packed with dreams and desperation, in search of work that promised to lift them from poverty's grasp. They were ideal victims, their disappearances engineered to go unnoticed amid the chaos of urban life. And if some persistent relative or friend did begin searching, the Romanov sisters always had a ready, polished explanation about a sudden departure, a new opportunity in a far-off city, a hasty marriage, or some other fabricated tale that quelled suspicions and perpetuated the cycle of horror. The pain of these lost souls, the anguish of families left in eternal limbo, the sheer injustice. It all compounded into a symphony of sorrow that Dubrovin could no longer ignore. On September 27, 1904, after a week of tense, covert surveillance of the house, watching shadows flicker behind curtains, noting the comings and goings with a sense of impending doom, Dubrovin obtained a search warrant, his hands steady but his heart pounding with the weight of what he might uncover. The operation was executed in the dim light of early morning, when the city still slumbered and the inhabitants of the mansion were likely lost in uneasy dreams. What the police discovered as they breached the doors and descended into the depths surpassed their darkest, most nightmarish expectations, plunging them into a realm of horror that would scar their psyches forever. The basement of the mansion, cunningly hidden behind a massive iron door disguised as a bookshelf in Elizaveta Romanova's private study, a clever ruse that spoke of premeditated evil, was equipped like a genuine torture chamber, a place where human dignity was stripped away in layers of agony. The walls and floor were coldly tiled for the grim practicality of easy cleaning from bloodstains, a detail that sent chills down the spines of the officers. In the center loomed a metal table, equipped with cruel straps for restraining victims, evoking images of helpless struggles and muffled screams that echoed in the mind long after. Numerous instruments, sharp scalpels glinting under the light, jagged saws, merciless forceps, were neatly arranged on shelves, testifying not only to the medical education of the dreadful place's owners but also to their methodical, almost obsessive approach to inflicting pain. "I had worked in the police for 23 years, Dubrovin wrote in his report, his words trembling with the raw emotion of a man confronted with the abyss of human depravity. But I had never seen anything like it. This was not just a site for murder. It was a well-organized laboratory of death, where every tool had its designated place. Every procedure was meticulously documented in chilling detail. Everything indicated that we were dealing not with impulsive killers driven by passion or greed, but with individuals who had elevated murder to a perverse form of science, stripping away the humanity of their victims in pursuit of some twisted ideal. The air was thick with the ghosts of suffering, the silent screams of those who had met their end here. But the most visceral, soul-crushing horror awaited the investigators beyond, behind a second secret door that creaked open to reveal another room. A stark, clinical space lined with rows of glass containers that gleamed under the faint light like macabre trophies. In these vessels, preserved in the acrid embrace of formalin, were human organs. Beating hearts forever stilled, vital kidneys, livers that once sustained life, all harvested with surgical precision. Each container was neatly labeled with the victim's name and the date of extraction, a bureaucratic touch that amplified the tragedy, reducing lives to mere data points in a catalog of death. Some organs bore the scars of surgical manipulations. Precise incisions, careful sutures, traces of injections with unknown, ominous substances that hinted at experiments born from a mad quest for forbidden knowledge. The sight was enough to make even the hardiest officers falter, their stomachs churning with revulsion and their minds reeling from the profound disrespect for human life. In the far corner of this chamber of horrors, the investigators uncovered a large cabinet with drawers that pulled out to reveal the victim's personal belongings. Folded clothing still carrying the faint scent of their owners, delicate jewelry that once adorned hopeful necks, documents and letters to relatives filled with unfulfilled promises and loving words. Everything was neatly arranged and labeled, like morbid exhibits in a museum of suffering. Each item a poignant reminder of lives cut short, families torn apart, and dreams crushed under the weight of evil. The emotional impact was overwhelming, a tangible connection to the victim's humanity, making their pain feel immediate and personal. Alexandra Romanova, the younger sister, was arrested on the spot, her face a mask of defiance that barely concealed the fear beneath. Elizaveta was absent during the search. As it later emerged, she was at a reception with the governor of the Kuban region, casually discussing the organization of a charitable evening for orphans. A stark contrast that highlighted the depths of her hypocrisy and the agony of her double life. She was arrested right there, in the opulent halls of the governor's palace, her composure cracking as the reality of her crimes closed in, causing a scandal that rippled through high society in Ekaterinodar like a shockwave of betrayal and disbelief. The initial interrogations were fraught with tension, yielding no immediate results as both sisters maintained a stoic silence, refusing to answer the investigators' probing questions, their eyes cold and unyielding. Only after 3 grueling days in solitary confinement, days filled with isolation that must have amplified their inner turmoil and the weight of their guilt, did Alexandra begin to speak, her voice breaking the silence like a dam giving way to a flood of dark revelations. Her testimony, meticulously recorded by Court Secretary Feofan Kaprianov with a hand that surely trembled from the horror of the words, formed the bedrock of the indictment, unveiling a narrative of madness disguised as science. "I am not a murderer," Alexandra insisted with a fervor that bordered on delusion, her words laced with a twisted conviction that made the listener's blood run cold. "I am a scientist. My sister and I are continuing the great work of our father, Professor Romanov, who delved into the limits of human endurance and the tantalizing possibilities of extending life beyond natural bounds. Every death in our house was a sacrifice on the altar of science, a necessary pain for a greater good. These women did not die in vain. Their organs, their tissues, their very essence of life served a higher purpose. The relentless search for the key to immortality, a quest that could alleviate the universal suffering of aging and death. The arrogance in her voice, the lack of remorse, only deepened the tragedy, highlighting how far human ambition can stray into monstrosity. As the investigation delved deeper, peeling back layers of secrecy with painstaking effort, it revealed that the sister's father, Viktor Stepanovich Romanov, was indeed a doctor whose legacy was tainted by ethical violations. In 1880, he was expelled from the Imperial Medical Academy in St. Petersburg for conducting unethical experiments on vulnerable patients in a psychiatric clinic, experiments that prioritized curiosity over compassion, knowledge over kindness. After that disgraceful scandal, he relocated to southern Russia, where he continued his forbidden research in private, away from prying eyes but not from the shadows of moral decay. Both his daughters, impressionable and perhaps indoctrinated from a young age, received their medical education under his guidance, inheriting not just knowledge but a dangerous obsession that would lead to untold suffering. Father died in 1899, Alexandra recounted, her eyes distant as if reliving the moment with a mix of reverence and sorrow. But before his death, he extracted from us a solemn vow to continue his work, to carry the torch he had lit in the darkness of ignorance. He was so close to a breakthrough, a revelation that could change humanity forever. He had succeeded in significantly extending the lifespan of experimental rats using injections of extract from human liver, a discovery that hinted at the profound possibilities hidden within our bodies. My sister Elizaveta and I swore, with tears in our eyes and determination in our hearts, to see his research through to the end, no matter the cost, no matter the lives it might claim. The archives unearthed in the sisters' secret laboratory were a treasure trove of terror. Detailed records of conducted experiments, pages upon pages of clinical notes that documented the systematic study of various chemical compounds' effects on human organs. They injected extracts from one victim's tissues into others, observing the reactions with cold detachment, their notes devoid of empathy, focused solely on data that masked the human agony behind it. Their particular fascination lay in the endocrine system, the body's delicate orchestra of hormones, with many experiments concentrated on the glands of internal secretion. Probing, cutting, extracting in pursuit of secrets that nature guarded fiercely. We created a special elixir, Alexandra proudly declared during her interrogations, her tone infused with a mad scientist's glee that contrasted sharply with the horror of her words. It was a combination of extracts from the thyroid gland, adrenals, and pituitary, a potion that, when taken regularly, significantly slows the aging processes, promising a defiance of time itself. Elizaveta has been taking it for 5 years now, she claimed. Does she look her 43 years? Anyone would say she looks no older than 30, her skin smooth, her eyes bright, as if stealing youth from the graves of her victims. Indeed, everyone who had encountered Elizaveta Romanova noted her unusually youthful appearance, a vitality that seemed to defy the relentless march of time, evoking envy and suspicion in equal measure. City photographer Mikhail Glushko, who captured portraits of Ekaterinodar's high society with an artist's eye, testified with a voice tinged with unease. I photographed Madame Romanova annually for the past 6 years for the charitable almanac, each session a study in elegance. Strangely, in the latest photographs, she appears even younger than in the first ones. Her features softer, her glow more radiant. I attributed it to superior lighting quality or the artful application of cosmetics. But now, in light of these revelations, I understand the reason could be entirely different, far more sinister, rooted in the stolen lives of innocent women. The discrepancy between her external youth and the internal rot of her soul only amplified the tragedy, a poignant symbol of beauty built on blood. As the investigation progressed, layer by layer uncovering the depths of depravity, other shocking details emerged like skeletons from a forgotten grave. The Romanov sisters' house was not merely a site for murders and grotesque experiments. It served as a cunning cover for a larger, more insidious operation that preyed on vulnerability and desire. The sisters maintained clandestine connections with similar scientists in other cities across the vast Russian Empire, their network a web of shared madness. They exchanged research results with clinical detachment, traded tissue and organ samples as if they were mere commodities, and sometimes even live subjects. human beings reduced to experimental fodder in their quest for godlike power over life and death. In Elizaveta's personal correspondence, seized during the search and pored over with growing horror, letters were found from distant hubs like Moscow, St. Petersburg, Kiev, and even from abroad, Vienna and Berlin. All were composed in a scholarly style, laced with medical terminology and cryptic ciphers that veiled their true intent, but the content left no room for doubt. There existed an entire underground network of laboratories, a shadowy alliance engaged in similar macabre research, where human life was currency for progress. Dear colleague, one letter from someone signing as Dr. K from Moscow read, its words dripping with intellectual curiosity devoid of humanity. I have studied the results of your experiment number 17 with keen interest. The reaction of liver tissue to the introduction of the combined extract is particularly impressive, a breakthrough that could redefine our understanding. In my practice, I observed similar effects, but when using tissues from younger subjects aged 16 to 18, the outcomes were even more promising. I recommend lowering the age threshold of objects in future experiments to maximize efficacy. I eagerly await samples of the promised elixir, a substance that could unlock doors we never dreamed possible. In return, I am sending you a preparation obtained from the pituitary of subject K12, its potential vast and untapped. Of particular, heart-wrenching interest to the investigation was the role of local authorities in this tapestry of terror. How had the sisters managed to remain undetected for so long, conducting such large-scale criminal activity that claimed so many lives, each one a story of unfulfilled potential and shattered families? The answer, when it surfaced, was as simple as it was terrifying, revealing a corruption that ran deep and wide, eroding the very pillars of society. They did not cower in shadows but boldly integrated into the city's high society, weaving themselves into the fabric of power with calculated precision, using their position and connections to shield themselves from any whiff of suspicion. Elena Romanova was a frequent, charming guest at the governor's lavish receptions, her presence a fixture that lent an air of grace to the events. She donated significant sums to charity with a flourish, her generosity lauded in social circles, and even funded the construction of a new bell tower for the cathedral, a monument to piety that mocked the sacrilege of her actions. Alexandra, leveraging her medical training, provided free consultations to patients at the city hospital, her selfless acts earning her a reputation as a saintly woman among the common folk, who whispered her praises while ignorant of the blood on her hands. We had patrons in the highest echelons of power, Alexandra confessed during one interrogation, her voice a mix of pride and resignation that chilled the room. Some knew about our work and secretly supported it, seeing in it a path to personal immortality, a seductive promise that blinded them to the moral abyss. Others simply received generous compensation for turning a blind eye to the oddities occurring in our house, their greed outweighing any sense of justice or humanity. The list of these patrons, discovered in a secret safe hidden in Elizaveta's bedroom and opened with trembling hands, caused a real earthquake in the administrative circles of the Kuban region, toppling illusions of integrity and exposing the rot within. It included names of high-ranking officials whose duty was to protect the innocent, gendarmerie officers sworn to uphold the law, prominent industrialists whose wealth was built on exploitation, and even clergymen whose faith should have guided them away from such evil. Next to each name were meticulously noted payment amounts or descriptions of special services rendered, a ledger of corruption that spoke to the profound betrayal of public trust and the pain it inflicted on society. Local newspapers, which initially covered the Romanov sisters' case with fervent detail, painting vivid pictures of the horror for a shocked public, soon received unofficial instructions from on high to reduce publications on the topic, stifling the truth and allowing the wounds to fester in silence. Nevertheless, the information about the horrific discoveries in the basement of the mansion on Krasnodar Street spread like wildfire throughout the empire, igniting outrage and sorrow in hearts far and wide. Metropolitan publications like Novoye Vremya and Russkoye Slovo, eager to expose the underbelly of society, sent special correspondents to Ekaterinodar, their reports dripping with the drama and tragedy of the revelations. The famous journalist Vladimir Gilyarovsky, renowned for his unflinching reports on Moscow's underworld and the human suffering within, conducted his own exhaustive investigation, publishing the results in a series of articles under the evocative collective title Kuban Vampires. What happened in Ekaterinodar? Gilyarovsky wrote with a pen fueled by righteous indignation. Transcends the boundaries of ordinary criminal offenses. It is a symptom of a deep, festering malaise in our society, where behind the veneer of decency, charity, and social grace, unimaginable evil can lurk, preying on the vulnerable with impunity. The Romanov sisters are not just murderers. They are the grotesque spawn of a perverted philosophy that elevates so-called scientific progress above the sanctity of human life and the bedrock of morality, sacrificing innocence on the altar of ambition. Medical expertise, conducted with the utmost rigor in the laboratories of Moscow University, confirmed Alexandra's chilling claims about the elixir of youth, adding a layer of scientific intrigue to the tragedy. Chemical analysis of the liquid discovered in Elizaveta's personal quarters revealed a concoction that indeed contained extracts from human organs, blended with various chemical compounds, including minute doses of arsenic, a substance known to, under certain conditions, slow the visible signs of aging on the skin, preserving an illusion of youth at a horrific cost. We cannot confidently assert that this preparation truly possesses a rejuvenating effect in the long term. The experts concluded in their report, their words heavy with caution and ethical concern. However, short-term improvement in appearance upon its use is quite possible. A fleeting mask that hides the rot beneath. This explains Elizaveta Romanova's youthful look, noted by many witnesses, but at what price? The lives of the innocent, the pain of the forgotten. During the further investigation, as layers of secrecy were peeled away with relentless determination, new shocking details emerged, each one a dagger to the heart, deepening the sense of betrayal and loss. It turned out that the Romanov sisters' house served yet another sinister function. It was an elite brothel for select clients from among high-ranking officials and wealthy industrialists, a place where desire met exploitation in the most degrading ways. This was no ordinary house of tolerance, testified the maid Agafya Sidorova, her voice trembling with the weight of suppressed memories and the pain of complicity, having worked for the sisters for over 2 years. The girls there were special, young, beautiful, educated souls full of promise. Many came from other cities, lured by false promises, thinking they were being hired as companions or governesses to respectable families, only to be locked away on the 3rd floor, where luxurious rooms were set up for clandestine meetings with clients. Some girls, brave and defiant, tried to escape or refused the degrading work. Those poor souls were never seen again, their fates sealed in silence. Madame Elizaveta would say with a cold smile that they were sent to another city for better opportunities. But we servants guessed the truth. They were taken to the basement, their screams echoing in our nightmares. Elizaveta Romanova's diary, discovered during the search and read with growing horror, contained detailed, meticulous records of the brothel's clients, their perverse preferences, and the substantial amounts they paid for services that commodified human dignity. Next to some names were cryptic marks, PM, potential material. A chilling notation that the investigation surmised indicated individuals the sisters planned to use in their experiments, blurring the lines between exploitation and extermination. They didn't just exploit women, Agafya Sidorova asserted, her testimony a cry for the voiceless. Sometimes men were brought to the house drunk, drugged, their wills broken. They were immediately taken to the basement, their fates sealed. I heard their desperate screams piercing the night, but Madame Alexandra explained it away as medical procedures she performed for poor patients out of kindness, a lie that twisted the knife deeper. In total, according to the investigation's painstaking estimates, the Romanov sisters' victims numbered at least 70 people, mostly women aged 16 to 30, their youth stolen in its prime, but also about a dozen men whose stories added layers of complexity to the tragedy. The exact number was impossible to determine with certainty, as many documents were deliberately destroyed by the sisters on the eve of their arrest in a frantic attempt to erase their sins, and some remains, according to Alexandra's cold confessions, were buried in various, desolate locations outside the city, their graves unmarked and their memories fading into oblivion. We were not working only for ourselves, Alexandra stated in one of her final interrogations, her words a mix of defiance and revelation that sent shivers through the room. Our research was financed by certain individuals from St. Petersburg, shadowy figures with power and ambition. They were interested not only in the elixir of youth but also in our other developments, such as means for altering consciousness and suppressing will, tools that could control minds and bend societies. This had state significance, a dark undercurrent in the empire's machinations. These statements, dripping with implications of conspiracy, piqued the investigators' interest to feverish levels, but further questioning on the topic was met with Alexandra's resolute rebuff, her warning that she had said too much and that there were forces even justice should not trifle with, leaving a pall of fear and unfinished business. The Romanov sisters' case was not tried in an ordinary court, where the light of public scrutiny might have exposed more truths, but by a special judicial commission created by order of the Minister of Justice, a move that reeked of cover-up. The hearings were held behind closed doors, without public or press access, fostering an environment of secrecy that spawned numerous rumors. Whispers that the authorities were desperately trying to conceal the true scale of the crime and the names of the sisters' high-ranking patrons, protecting the elite at the expense of justice for the victims. The trial of the Romanov sisters turned into a farce, wrote defense attorney Sergei Malyshev in his diary, his entries filled with frustration and moral outrage, having attended several sessions where truth was twisted. Witness testimonies incriminating high-ranking individuals were systematically excluded from the case, erased as if they never existed. Some crucial pieces of evidence mysteriously disappeared from storage, vanished into thin air under suspicious circumstances. It seems someone very influential, pulling strings from the shadows, was keenly interested in ensuring the full truth about these women's activities, and the web of corruption they wove did not leave the courtroom, preserving the illusion of societal order at the cost of genuine justice. Despite all attempts to hush up the case and minimize its impact, the court found the Romanov sisters guilty of murdering 3 people, only those whose remains were definitively identified, a fraction of the true toll. Both were sentenced to death by hanging, a verdict that promised closure but delivered only more mystery and pain. However, the sentence was never carried out, adding another layer of tragedy and intrigue to the saga. 3 days before the scheduled execution, on the night of December 7, 1904, a strange, ominous incident occurred at the Ekaterinodar prison, shrouded in shadows and secrets. According to the official report, crafted with careful ambiguity, Elizaveta Romanova committed suicide by ingesting poison, somehow smuggled into her cell despite stringent security, a feat that strained credulity. Alexandra was found dead in her cell the next morning, her body cold and still. According to the prison doctor's hurried conclusion, she died from an apoplectic stroke, an insult to the brain that seemed too convenient, too tidy for the chaos of their lives. Yet many, including those closest to the case, doubted the official version, their suspicions fueled by whispers and inconsistencies that hinted at a deeper conspiracy. Prison guard Ignat Prokhorov, on duty that fateful night, later confided to his close ones with a voice laced with fear and conviction that some men in military uniforms but without any insignia, ghosts of authority, arrived at the prison under the cover of darkness. They spoke at length with the prison warden in hushed tones, their conversation thick with urgency, after which they were escorted to the Romanov sisters' cells, the air heavy with foreboding. An hour later, they departed the prison, carrying several bulky suitcases that bulged with unknown contents, leaving behind an eerie silence. "I am certain the sisters did not die," Prokhorov asserted, his words a testament to the lingering doubt that plagued many. "They were taken away that night, spirited into the unknown, and the bodies presented for identification belonged to other women who resembled them externally. Poor substitutes in a game of deception. I saw the real Elizaveta Romanova up close enough to swear that the woman passed off as her corpse was 10 years older and had a scar on her left cheek that Elizaveta never bore, a mark that betrayed the lie." Soon after these events, a series of strange, unsettling incidents unfolded, each one eroding the pursuit of truth and amplifying the sense of loss. Constable Dubrovin, the tenacious investigator who had led the charge against the sisters' evil, was abruptly transferred to a remote garrison in Siberia, a punishment disguised as duty that silenced his voice and removed him from the center of power. Court Secretary Kaprianov, whose records had captured the horror in ink, died suddenly from a heart attack, his passing too timely to be coincidence. The archive containing the case materials, a repository of evidence and testimonies, was destroyed in a fire that ravaged the district court building. its cause never determined, leaving ashes where justice should have stood. The mansion on Krasnodar Street, the epicenter of so much pain and deception, stood vacant for several years, its windows like empty eyes staring into the void, until it was purchased by city authorities and rebuilt into a gymnasium. A place of learning that ironically sought to nurture young minds where so many young lives had been destroyed. During the reconstruction, all basement premises were walled up with finality, as if to bury the horrors forever, but the echoes of suffering lingered. Local residents avoided the building for a long time, their steps quickening as they passed, claiming that at night, strange sounds emanated from it. Women's weeping that tugged at the heart, desperate screams that pierced the soul, reminders of the unrestful spirits trapped within. In 1912, 8 years after the events that had scarred the city, a scientific monograph titled Endocrine Secrets of Longevity was published in Berlin, authored by a certain Dr. Elizabeth Romanov, a name that sent shockwaves through those who remembered. The book caused a scandal in medical circles with its bold, audacious hypotheses about significantly extending human life using certain hormonal preparations, hypotheses born from experiments that mirrored the horrors of Krasnodar. Particularly shocking was the section where the author described experiments on humans, allegedly conducted in one of the eastern countries, detailing procedures that evoked the same clinical detachment as the Romanov sisters' notes. Several copies of this book reached Russia, and one fell into the hands of journalist Gilyarovsky, who immediately published an article drawing stark parallels between the monograph's author and Elena Romanova, reigniting the pain and questions long suppressed. However, official authorities refused to comment on these coincidences, their silence a wall of denial, and soon all copies of the book in Russia were confiscated by censorship, buried like the victims themselves. In 1914, with the outbreak of World War I, the Romanov sisters' story was overshadowed by larger, global tragedies, its details fading amid the chaos of battle and loss. The subsequent revolutionary events and civil war completely erased public memory of the case, with archives destroyed or scattered, witnesses perishing in the turmoil or emigrating to distant lands, their stories lost to time. Only at the end of the 20th century, when researchers began studying previously classified documents with renewed vigor, did the story of the Kuban vampires attract attention again, resurfacing like a ghost from the past to remind us of unresolved evils. Fragments of investigative commission reports, personal letters from event participants filled with raw emotion, and newspaper publications from that era were discovered, allowing a partial reconstruction of what happened, though many details remain shrouded in mystery and pain. Particular interest lies in the fate of the Romanov sisters after their supposed death in prison, a fate that hints at escape, survival, and the continuation of their dark legacy. There is testimony that a woman resembling Elizaveta Romanova worked from 1907 to 1912 in a closed scientific institute in Berlin, where research strikingly similar to the experiments in the Romanov house basement was conducted, evoking questions about whether the horror had simply relocated. An archival photograph of the institute's staff captures a figure whose features match Elizaveta's, her expression one of quiet determination amid a group of scientists. And some may have even interned in her Berlin laboratory, carrying forward methods born from suffering. This does not mean the Romanov sisters were directly linked to Nazi crimes, but their methods and philosophy undoubtedly influenced the formation of this inhuman system, a tragic thread connecting past atrocities to future horrors. Meanwhile, in Krasnodar itself, formerly Ekaterinodar, the story of the murderous sisters gradually transformed into an urban legend, a tale whispered around campfires and in dim rooms, passed down through generations and accruing new details and mystical elements that amplified its emotional resonance. Tales of the Kuban vampires endured, evoking shivers of fear and empathy for the victims whose names faded but whose pain lingered. The mansion on Krasnodar Street, where the Romanov sisters' house once stood as a monument to evil, was destroyed during World War II's devastation, and in the 1950s an administrative building rose in its place, a structure of modernity built on foundations of tragedy. However, workers in this institution often complained of inexplicable discomfort, debilitating headaches, and even hallucinations that disrupted their days, as if the building itself was haunted by the unresolved anguish. Some claimed to see a ghostly figure of a woman in early 20th century attire passing through walls, her presence a silent accusation, a reminder of the lives lost and justice denied. In 1976, during the laying of utilities near this building, a routine task turned fateful. Workers discovered a walled-up basement not marked on any plans. Its existence a secret buried deep. Inside were remnants of strange equipment and numerous glass containers that evoked memories of the Romanov laboratory, stirring a collective gasp of recognition and dread. Officially, it was announced as remains of a pre-revolutionary pharmaceutical laboratory, a bland explanation that fooled few. But rumors that the true death laboratory of the Romanov sisters had been found spread like wildfire through the city, reigniting old fears and sorrows. Soon after, the premises were filled with concrete by order of local authorities, sealing away the past once more, and the workers who made the discovery were transferred to other sites in different parts of the city, their stories silenced but not forgotten. My grandfather Nikolai Stepanovich was assigned to the brigade clearing that basement, recounts Krasnodar local historian Igor Bereznoy, his voice heavy with inherited emotion. He didn't like talking about it, the memories too painful, but once, after drinking to numb the past, he told me they found not only laboratory equipment but also human remains. Bones walled into the walls, silent witnesses to unspeakable acts. According to him, people arriving from Moscow in civilian clothes, their faces stern and authoritative, ordered everyone to keep silent and took away all the fines, vanishing into the bureaucracy. Grandfather said the atmosphere in that basement was so heavy, so laden with despair, that many workers had panic attacks and hallucinations, their minds fracturing under the weight of history's ghosts. One even claimed to see a woman in a white coat watching them from a dark corner, her gaze piercing and accusatory. When they shone a flashlight her way, she vanished like mist, leaving only a chill in the air. These stories could be dismissed as ordinary urban legends, embellished tales born from fear and imagination, if not for one compelling circumstance that lends credence to the enduring mystery. In 2000, while studying declassified KGB archives with scholarly diligence, researchers discovered documents indicating that in 1976, a secret pre-revolutionary object was indeed found in Krasnodar, its discovery stirring echoes of the past. According to these documents, the found materials were so important, so potentially revolutionary or dangerous, that they were immediately transported to Moscow and handed over to a closed research institute dealing with gerontology and life extension issues, a continuation of the very quest that drove the sisters to madness. Among the seized materials of particular interest are manuscripts presumably belonging to ER and AR, containing formulas and methods for preparing long-acting preparations. Read a report signed by State Security Colonel Klimov, his words clinical but hinting at the excitement beneath. Initial tests show potential effectiveness of some described compounds, a legacy of horror turned to science. It is recommended to continue research in laboratory conditions with maximum secrecy, lest the public learn of the origins. What became of these studies afterward is unknown, lost in the mists of time and classification. After the USSR's collapse, many archives were reclassified, and some documents likely destroyed in a bid to bury the past. However, indirect evidence suggests the work continued at least until the late 1980s, a persistent shadow of the original tragedy. In 1984, a closed medical journal Issues in Experimental Gerontology, published for a narrow circle of specialists, featured an article on the question of hormonal regulation of aging processes, recounts science historian Anatoly Severtsov, his analysis revealing uncomfortable parallels. Its authors, hidden under initials to preserve anonymity, described experiments remarkably reminiscent of those conducted by the Romanov sisters, evoking a sense of continuity in suffering. Of course, it now involved work with animals, a step removed from human horror, but the methodology and some formulations were practically identical to those in the surviving fragments of Elizaveta Romanova's notes, a bridge across time that carried the weight of past pain. After this publication, traces of the research vanish into obscurity. Likely, with the onset of perestroika and the subsequent USSR collapse, funding for the project ceased, and materials were either destroyed or passed into private hands, their secrets guarded by those who sought to profit from them. However, some experts suggest the work could have continued in new conditions under commercial structures, adapting the dark knowledge to modern capitalism. In the 1990s, several exclusive anti-aging clinics appeared in Russia and abroad, offering wealthy clients costly rejuvenation procedures that promise to turn back the clock, notes Severtsov. Officially, they use stem cells, hormonal therapy, and other modern methods. But rumors persist that some of these clinics offer select clients special procedures based on much older and darker knowledge, a legacy of tragedy that refuses to die. Of course, there is no direct evidence linking these clinics to the Romanov sisters' research, but the coincidences are thought-provoking, stirring a mix of curiosity and dread. One such coincidence involves the Revival Clinic, opened in Moscow in 2000 amid the new millennium's optimism. Its owner, Dr. Elena Romanova, claimed with pride to be a descendant of a famous lineage of gerontology doctors working since the early 20th century, her name an echo that resonated with history's ghosts. The clinic offered exclusive rejuvenation procedures based on ancient family recipes supplemented by modern technologies, blending the old with the new in a way that evoked unease. Among Revival's clients were high-ranking officials, businessmen, and show business stars, all chasing the illusion of eternal youth at any cost. In 2007, the clinic suddenly closed after a series of inspections initiated by an anonymous complaint about medical ethics violations, the revelations stirring whispers of hidden horrors. The official reason, licensing breaches, seemed odd, given the high status of clients and the owner's obvious government connections that should have shielded them. Even stranger was that shortly after the Moscow clinic closed, a similar establishment named Renaissance opened in Switzerland near Zurich, its emergence like a phoenix from ashes. Its owner was a company registered in Cyprus, a veil of anonymity, but many employees, including the chief physician, were from Russia, carrying forward the legacy. I worked as an administrator at the Revival Clinic in Moscow and then was invited to the same position at the Swiss branch, recounts Natalia K. Name changed at the interviewee's request, her voice laced with lingering fear. In Moscow, everything was official, standard procedures, though very expensive, promising beauty without the blood. But in Switzerland, for special clients, there was an additional range of services, shrouded in secrecy. They were conducted in a separate wing of the building, accessible only to select staff, the air thick with unspoken dread. I was never there myself, but I heard conversations that chilled me. Talk of using some special biological materials delivered from third-world countries, sources that evoked images of exploitation and suffering. No one explained specifics, but the atmosphere was so oppressive, so heavy with moral weight, that I quit after 3 months, haunted by what I might have unwittingly supported. Direct evidence linking modern anti-aging clinics to the Romanov sisters' experiments, of course, does not exist, but the web of connections weaves a tapestry of possibility. However, many researchers of this story are convinced that the great work never ceased. It simply transformed, adapting to new conditions and opportunities, perpetuating the cycle of ambition over ethics. The idea of extending life and youth at the expense of others is one of humanity's oldest dark fantasies, says psychologist Irina Svetlova, who studies the phenomenon of serial killers with a focus on their emotional void. Legends of vampires, witches drinking the blood of virgins to preserve youth, appear in the folklore of various peoples, tales born from fear and desire. The Romanov sisters' story is just one manifestation of this archetypal dark dream, cloaked in pseudoscientific form to lend it legitimacy. And I wouldn't be surprised if this story continues in our days, perhaps in more sophisticated and technological forms, where the pain of the past informs the horrors of the present. In 2010, a documentary film, Kuban Vampires, On the Trail of the Romanov Sisters, was released, produced by the Krasnodar studio Retrokino with a passion for uncovering forgotten truths. The film's creators conducted their own investigation, interviewing historians, local experts, and descendants of event witnesses with empathy and rigor, seeking to honor the victim's memory. They visited sites connected to the sisters' activities, including the modern building on the site of their former mansion, where the air still seemed thick with unresolved grief. While working on the film, we encountered astonishing coincidences and oddities, recounts director Andrei Kravchenko, his tone reflective of the emotional toll. Many archival documents that should have contained information on the Romanov case according to catalogs turned out lost or under restoration, barriers that felt deliberate. Some witnesses refused to speak on camera, citing undesirable consequences that hinted at lingering threats. And one of our consultants, historian Viktor Samilov, suddenly ceased cooperation without explanation and emigrated to Canada a month later. His departure a mystery that added to the intrigue. All this created a sense that even after so many years, this story remains dangerous, its shadows long and unforgiving. A particularly intriguing part of the film was an interview with an elderly woman who introduced herself as Olga Dubrovina, granddaughter of that very Constable Dubrovin who uncovered the Romanov sisters' crime with dogged determination. According to her, her grandfather, returning from Siberian exile after the revolution, a journey that broke many but not his spirit, left a sealed envelope with instructions to open it only after his death, a final act of revelation. In this letter, grandfather recounted that the Romanov sisters' case was far more extensive than it initially seemed. Olga Dubrovina claimed, her voice quavering with inherited emotion. He wrote that Elizaveta and Alexandra were only part of a vast network of similar researchers operating throughout Russia and beyond, a conspiracy that spanned borders and morals. Their scientific work was funded by some secret organization with representatives in the highest echelons of power in several European states, a shadowy cabal chasing immortality at any cost. Grandfather believed he was sent to exile precisely because he came too close to unraveling this secret, and he was certain the sisters did not die in prison but were secretly taken abroad to continue their work in safer conditions, perpetuating the cycle of pain. Constable Dubrovin's letter, if it truly exists, is a unique historical document brimming with potential revelations, but its authenticity cannot be verified, lost to time or deliberate obstruction. Olga Dubrovina claimed the original was confiscated during a search of her apartment by unknown individuals posing as state security officers back in 1972, a theft that echoed the cover-ups of the past. The film's creators could only rely on her recollections of the document's content, piecing together fragments of truth. Another fascinating testimony presented in the film was a photograph dated 1937, taken in Berlin at an international gerontology congress amid the rising tensions of the era. Among the participants was a woman strikingly resembling Elizaveta Romanova, though by then she would have been over 70. In the photo, she looked no older than 50, her features defying time in a way that mirrored her Elixir's promises. The caption on the reverse read, "Dr. E.R., Specialist in Endocrine Regulation of Aging Processes, Argentina," a detail that sparked endless speculation. Of course, this photograph, like many other pieces of evidence for the Romanov sisters' survival, could be a forgery or mistaken identification, a trick of light and memory. However, the quantity of such testimonies, their consistency across decades, and geographical distribution prompt deep reflection on the possibility that the Kuban vampire story did not end in an Ekaterinodar prison cell in 1904, but persisted like a malignant thread through history. The most likely scenario seems that the Romanov sisters were indeed rescued from execution and taken abroad by influential patrons, believes historian Alexei Morozov, his analysis steeped in years of research and emotional investment. The question is who these patrons were and what their motives were: power, immortality, or something darker. The version of some international secret organization interested in developing an elixir of youth seems too fantastical for some, but the evidence whispers otherwise. More likely, it involved political interests, the shadowy games of empires. The early 20th century was the era of modern intelligence services formation, where the Russian Okhrana, German intelligence, British services actively pursued methods of mind control, interrogation tools, psychotropic substances that could bend wills and extract secrets. Judging by some documents, the Romanov sisters experimented in this direction as well, their work a tool for control as much as for youth. Perhaps they were saved precisely to continue these researches, their horror repurposed for statecraft. This version finds confirmation in certain indirect sources that add layers to the tragedy. In the memoirs of General Spiridovich, one of the Tsarist Okhrana leaders, there is mention of a special laboratory in the southern gubernias developing preparations of special purpose for interrogating political criminals, substances that could break minds without leaving marks. The laboratory's exact location is not specified, but the timeframe and geographic region match the Romanov sisters' activities, a coincidence too precise to ignore. Another intriguing document is a report from German military attaché in Russia, Baron von Lauenstein, dated March 1904, 6 months before the sisters' arrest. It mentions promising medical research in the Kuban region with potential military value and recommends establishing contact with the research leaders for possible collaboration, hinting at international intrigue. All this indicates that the Romanov sisters' activities may have had not only scientific but also political and military significance, a multifaceted horror that extended beyond personal madness. This would explain the interest from various states' intelligence services and the possible organization of their escape from prison, a rescue that denied closure to the victims' families. As for the further fate of the Kuban vampires, the most credible seems the version of their relocation to Germany, where they continued their research under the patronage of German military and medical circles, adapting to new patrons. After Germany's defeat in World War I, they likely moved to South America, a traditional refuge for many ambiguous figures of that time, lands of exile and reinvention. In the archive of the Argentine Immigration Service, documents have been preserved on Elizabeth and Alexandra Romanov, who arrived in Buenos Aires in 1919 from Spain, reports researcher Maria Santos from the University of Buenos Aires, her findings adding poignant detail to the saga. According to these documents, they were doctors from Russia and received residency permits by recommendation of influential local residents, a network that persisted. Further records show they opened a private clinic in a Buenos Aires suburb, specializing in rejuvenation procedures that promised to defy age. The clinic operated until the mid-1950s and closed after the owner's death. But judging by the dates, Elizaveta would have been about 90 by then, and Alexandra 85. However, a local newspaper reporting their deaths described them as remarkably youthful ladies who looked no older than 60, their appearance a testament to their elixir's dark efficacy. Were the Argentine Elizabeth and Alexandra Romanov the very same sisters from Ekaterinodar? There is no direct proof, no smoking gun, but the coincidence of names, profession, specialization, and unusual youthfulness is too much for mere chance, stirring a sense of ongoing tragedy. Another interesting testimony relates to documents found in 2001 in the Argentine police archive about an investigation into a series of young women's disappearances in the area where the Romanov clinic was located, echoes of the past that chill the bone. From 1920 to 1955, at least 30 women aged 16 to 30 vanished without a trace there, their fates unknown but suspected. Investigations yielded no results, but police reports noted that many of the missing were last seen heading toward the rejuvenation clinic for affluent ladies, a pattern that mirrored the horrors of Krasnodar. This is very similar to the Romanov sisters' modus operandi, believes criminologist Viktor Leontiev, his voice grave with the weight of history. The same victim category, young, vulnerable women, the same method of luring them under the pretext of work or treatment, promises that turn to prisons. Even if the Argentine Romanovs were not the same sisters from Ekaterinodar, they clearly operated according to the same scheme and with the same goals, perpetuating a cycle of pain across continents. After the Romanov sisters' death, their clinic was sold to new owners and repurposed as an ordinary sanatorium, but according to local residents' testimonies, the former clinic's basement premises were walled up by authorities' order, sealing secrets once more, and the entire medical archive was confiscated by the police, lost to time or deliberate destruction. What became of these documents afterward is unknown, but the silence speaks volumes. In the 1960s to 1970s, several elite anti-aging clinics opened in Argentina, Chile, and Paraguay, founded by doctors who claimed to be pupils of the great doctors Romanov, carrying the torch of tragedy forward. All these clinics shared not only their field of activity but also a scandalous reputation that evoked the past's shadows. Periodically, rumors of strange disappearances, unexplained deaths, and illegal experiments leaked to the press, stirring public outrage and fear. However, the establishment's high patrons usually swiftly quashed any investigations, protecting the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. In our days, the Romanov sisters' story remains one of the gloomiest enigmas in Russia's early 20th century criminal history, a tale of pain that refuses to fade. The absence of many key documents, contradictory testimonies, strange coincidences, and inexplicable accidents create a sense that someone is deliberately trying to conceal the truth about this case, perpetuating the injustice. Why does the Kuban vampire story still evoke such interest? Wonders psychologist Maria Volkova, her analysis delving into the human psyche, because it touches humanity's deepest fears and hopes: the terror of mortality, the allure of eternal youth. The fear of death and the desire for eternal youth unite people of all eras and cultures, a universal ache. The Romanov sisters' story reveals the dark side of this desire, the readiness of some to pursue their goal literally over corpses, sacrificing innocence for selfishness. And the most terrifying part is that such people exist in all times. Only their methods change with the technological possibilities of the era, evolving but never extinguishing the pain they cause. Indeed, over the past century, science has made enormous strides in understanding aging processes and methods of life extension. But the ethical dilemmas persist, a legacy of the Romanovs' madness. Modern research in genetics, stem cells, regenerative medicine opens new horizons, but the boundary between ethical and unethical remains fragile. Today, no one would kill people to obtain an elixir of youth. It's not only criminal but scientifically pointless, says gerontologist Andrei Simonov, yet his words carry a cautionary tone. But cloning, genetic modifications, experiments with embryonic cells, all this raises serious ethical questions, echoing the past's horrors. And the Romanov sisters' story serves as a grim reminder of what can happen when scientific ambitions completely displace moral principles, leading to suffering that spans generations. However, some researchers believe their activities were not limited to medical experiments, uncovering occult dimensions that add mysticism to the tragedy. In their archives, strange records unrelated to medicine have been found, texts resembling ancient mystical treatises with descriptions of rituals and incantations allegedly capable of extending life by absorbing life force, a blend of science and sorcery. Upon careful study, it becomes evident they were interested in the metaphysical side of aging, says occult historian Valentina Michailova. Elizaveta's diary mentions a journey to Tibet in 1895, meetings with Lamas for secret knowledge. Other documents speak of transferring life energy through rituals. This suggests their experiments were ancient magical practices in pseudoscientific form, a dark fusion that amplified the horror. In European tradition, it's Countess Bathory bathing in virgin's blood, explains cultural anthropologist Dmitry Kuznetsov. The Romanov sisters tried to justify these beliefs scientifically, merging occult with medicine. This hypothesis finds confirmation in symbols carved in their laboratory, ancient magical signs for immortality cults. Another aspect is their father's role. Before the academy, he lived in India and Tibet, studying healing and possibly esoteric practices, a foundation for the sisters' madness. The text truncates, but the narrative implies further exploration of esoteric influences and enduring mysteries, leaving a profound sense of unease, the lingering pain of unresolved tragedy that echoes through time, a cautionary tale of ambition's cost.